All right, let's wait for some people to get in. All right, just waiting a few minutes for a few people to get in, and then I'll just kind of start. All right, so I've I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. If you guys like the content, again, like, comment, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss one of our uploads. Um, so college football playoff has been just absolutely bonkers. If you guys watched the past few days, you would know that. And honestly, I don't know how you get a better playoff than this. Um, it really just depends on like what you prefer in terms of like format and seeding, but pretty much every game was at least solidly watchable. Um, except for Ohio State, Oregon, that was an abomination. I don't know how, but it was an abomination. Um, and it really just goes to show just how insane football really is. Sorry for the hiccup, y'all. Um, but it really just tells a perfect story of people who don't like the format of the college football playoff just don't really understand it too much, which I guess makes sense. But also, hold on, I'm gonna pen something real quick. All right, so now what we've got is a lot of just fans of different conferences going back and forth with each other, right? And I feel like it's honestly kind of unfair to a lot of other people, and honestly unfair to the vast majority of college football fans who genuinely like this playoff and like how it's gone. I'm not saying don't have an opinion one way or the other, because that would be me essentially telling you, hey, I know what's right better than any of you guys do who are also watching these games. I don't know any better than you. I won't know any better than you because I've only been on this earth 17 years and I've only watched like good football for about 9 of them. Okay. But I do know this: anybody complaining about who got put in the playoff, you don't know what you're talking about, okay? Nor do I know what I'm talking about, really. That's why it's subjective, okay? That's why you have all of these um areas of concern with the playoff in particular, that you don't really know what's going on because the rule set is not, it's basically the standard to getting in the playoff is not a set standard, and it should be. It really should be, because if it's not, what are you, like, what is the basis to get in at that point? And like, you have the argument with Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. I didn't hear any of those arguments because, to me, right, if you have to say, if you're a three-loss team and you're trying to prove to me that you should be in over a two-loss team that maybe play an extra game than you, i.e., SMU, right? I'm not going to hear you out, because if you're in that position with that, right? I'm not going to hear you threaten to stop watching or boycott a entire sport because your team didn't get the 11 seed or the 12 seed. Okay? I'm not going to hear that argument, because if you're in that position to begin with, you should have won your games earlier to where you're not in that spot. Okay? But the SEC, the mantra of, oh, these three loss SEC teams are just better and they play a tougher schedule, they go through a gauntlet, therefore they should be given the benefit of the doubt. That's bullcrap. That's absolute bullcrap. And I've been saying it all season long. No, you shouldn't get the benefit of the doubt because you play in a supposed tougher conference than everybody else. Which, by the way, this is the most down the SEC has been since like the early 2000s. So, again, not gonna hear you out on that, okay? Like, unless Texas beats Ohio State, this will be only the 3rd time since 2005 that the SEC's not part of the national championship game, okay? Now, to kind of go back on my point, right? Let's go back to 2023, last year, okay? So Florida State obviously got left out for Alabama last year. I didn't think it was fair then. I don't think it's fair now. However, I understand both arguments on why it's happening, right? And a lot of people, especially now, are like, oh, like, look at what Florida State did against Georgia. Look at what they've done this year. They didn't deserve to be in the playoff. And my answer to that is, okay, then do on field results not matter? Which I hate the argument of, by the way. Like, do do the games not matter? Why do you play the games? I'll tell you why you play the games, because if Bama doesn't get that 4th and 31 miracle against Auburn that week before, they're not in the playoff conversation, and Florida State's probably in. If Texas that last year loses that wire to wire game against Kansas State, they're not in the conversation. If Florida State loses to Florida, they're not in the conversation. So you have all of these different arguments that for one don't make any sense when you put them all together. And for two, you have to understand that um other people have the same opinions or different opinions, right? And I still think Florida State deserved to be in the playoffs. I don't work for a network. No one owns the rights to this show. So how could that be? Does it mean I'm just completely out in left field and I don't know what I'm talking about? Or could it be, and hear me out for a minute, you have your feelings, I have my feelings, both are set in some pretty good logic, okay? Like, I will admit when I'm wrong on takes. I haven't admitted that I'm wrong on a Florida State take because I still believe that they should have been in. I'm not going to admit that I'm wrong on something because someone wants me to. No. It's like you're going into political opinions, like, right? You're not going to change someone's mind unless they change their own, okay? Changing someone's mind on the playoff is literally like trying to change someone's political opinions, all right? You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it yourself. Now, you can have debates and you can have discussions about what you think is right or wrong, but at the end of the day, it's still just that. It's just a discussion, right? Like, it's like the same thing this year, right? If you put Alabama and say BYU head to head on resume, right? Yeah, Bama's got more ranked wins. Bama's got this, Bama's got that. You know what Bama also has? Two losses to teams that combined for a 500 record when BYU's two losses are to also about a 500 Kansas team in which they lost the turnover battle but outgained them, and a wire to wire loss against Arizona State, who nearly took down Texas. Are we really comparing here? Because if you want to say a team got screwed, I'll hear you out. But if you look at resumes outside of strength of schedule for BYU and Alabama, it's not even close. And BYU also has a top 10 win over a college football playoff team. Like, if you want to say a team got screwed, be my guest. But BYU got screwed a lot more than a lot of these SEC teams are. And now, because Ole Miss won last night, of course, their fans and Lane Kiffin are clamoring, oh, like, you didn't put us in the playoff. This is what we're going to do. You should have put us in the playoff. Guys, you were playing a Duke team that had, I think, 15 of their starters out, and their coach, I think, was honestly sick the week before and didn't get on the field for like run throughs and stuff. So not only is your argument invalid, it's totally stupid. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the SEC is like this bottom conference. I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is say, look, there's good teams in every conference, right? The Big 12, there's good teams. There's good teams in the ACC, there's good teams in the Big 10, there's good teams in the SEC. Hell, there's good teams in the Mountain West American Athletic and Conference USA. That's always going to be the case. And let me say this, is the SEC's teams of like 6 through 10 in their rankings better than any other conference? Yes, it is. And they are. But why do you think that is? It's because the SEC beats each other up, and which makes their records look a lot better than they probably really should be. The top 4 this year was absolutely clear on who they were. It was Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame. That's the top 4. That's your top 4. And yet, I'm hearing over and over again from just any SEC fan, right? That, oh, Bama and South Carolina and Ole Miss are just better, right? They're better teams with better resumes. Therefore, they should be ranked ahead of like a BYU or even a Clemson in rankings if you don't go based off the format. Now, that's BS. I called BS on it then. I'll call BS on it now. It's stupid. It is absolutely stupid. The SEC was the most overrated I've seen it be in a long time. And I don't even think it's their fault. I think it's the fault of people hyping them up to be a lot more than they really are, and people not understanding what record actually means, right? Record should mean something. That's why I said, that's why when Indiana got in the playoff, I had no problem with it because they should have been in the playoff. And there's no way you're going to convince me otherwise of that. I don't know. Just the format of this. Hold on. I'm going to close my door fully. Be back in like 10 seconds. Also got an earplug, so that way my ears are not going absolutely bonkers. So now what I'm basically saying, right, is that I think the argument of the SEC is just better and it isn't going to change that, nothing's going to change that, that needs to die. Like, that's a terrible, terrible argument to be having because not only do you close yourself off to debates like you should have, but it also just devalues the other conferences, right? Why call it the Power Four if you just think the SEC is better? You shouldn't. And like, I don't know. It it doesn't make a lot of sense in a football context. It really doesn't make a lot of sense in college football context, right? Imagine this scenario happening in like the NFL. It wouldn't happen because there's nothing that you can do that will devalue these teams' records because the talent gap is so minimal in the NFL that it honestly doesn't really matter too much. That's not the same thing in college, right? Like, I can go and I can look at a team's record and say, yeah, you didn't play as good at teams, but record should still matter. It should absolutely still matter. Like, I don't get that argument at all. That's the end of that rant. I just needed to get that off my chest first because that is something that I've just been thinking about a lot. All right. I'm actually going to go to the bathroom and I'll talk to you guys in just a minute. All right, we're back. And hold on, I'm gonna check a few things.